and welcome to another episode of The Big Ten with me, Brandon and Chaba.
And me, Simba Elijah Charles Kiage.
Now we have a lot of exciting and moving stories for you in store on our Big Ten today. But before we get into it, Simba, what's your take on what's happening in Turkana?
What is really biting about this story is that there's now a tussle between the county government where this is going on and the national government, because the county government are saying we are suffering, we have people dying. The media is also part of the story. We have people dying. But the national government is saying nobody has died. So who is fooling who here? That actually makes one of our opening stories on our Big Ten. But before we begin, to help us get through the week, we have open the Big Ten by giving you an issue that has been biting into Kenyan headlines: drought, deaths, and more suffering. Now, the National Drought Management Authority listed Samburu as one of the worst hit back in February. Also in the list was Kilifi, Samburu, Isiolo, West Pokot, and some parts of Tana River.
The Interior Ministry in a statement added that 9 counties are in the alert level while 14 are in the normal drought phase. The Turkana area has been facing severe problems to do with hunger, leaving a lot of individuals dead. Now, with there being a budget allocated for food security, why are there such scenarios happening in places like Turkana, and where does the money allocated for food security go to?
I think generally from our year-in, year-out budgets, the financial allocations to agriculture is just a mere 2% of the total budget. That clearly implies that that kind of allocation cannot create any meaningful impact in terms of agricultural development. But that said and done, I think the key challenge in Kenya is not agricultural production, because currently when you look around, particularly in the main basket of Kenyan food production, there is abundant foodstuff, which means that if in Kenya we had a clear-cut policy relating to not only production but distribution of what has been produced to consumers, then we won't have the problem which is there relating to hunger, particularly in the northern part of the country. We need to revisit the policy relating to agriculture so that we can reinvent some strategies geared towards enhancing accessibility to foodstuff, and more importantly, we need to shy away from the current policy of zeroing in on the production of food crops like maize. We need to diversify our production in agriculture so that particularly in those areas which are currently affected, we should see a clear-cut policy targeting the production of those nutritious products which are not only drought resistant, but which are also disease resistant. So that clearly tells me a situation where the government now need to diversify agricultural production, and more importantly, need to empower the small-scale farmer who is in the forefront of agricultural production. So that suggests that if we need to avoid the scenario which is there currently in agriculture, much of the funding need to focus on the small-scale farmer. Empower the small-scale farmer, give the small-scale farmer adequate agricultural inputs for him to be able to produce abundantly. And once we are able to do that, let's zero in terms of stocking what these farmers are producing. And that brings us to the point of the government to give appropriate pricing policies relating to agricultural products. That will boost the agricultural activity upon which the farmers can abundantly produce.
Now let's close the week by crossing over to another big moment this week, by crossing over to the market. Now, sometime on the Big Ten, we actually told you that the Treasury was going to open the Emakiba bond on February 26th. Now, the first tranche actually closed on March 10th. But these are the news. Did you invest or did you not? Either way, the Emakiba bond missed the 250 million shillings mark by just hitting 197 million shillings as investors were lent to a 364-day T-bill. Now, the Capital Markets Authority has reopened the bond for secondary trading on the Nairobi Securities Exchange, making the number of mobile traded bonds on the books to 3.
In 2017, Treasury raised 247.75 million Kenyan shillings, being 24.76% subscription out of the 1 billion Kenyan shillings that was put up for sale.
It's worth noting that only 150 million shillings of the pilot bond was fully taken up. Question is this a case of mistrust in the government? And why is Emakiba underperforming?
It's not because the public does not trust the government. You can see for now, people are oversubscribing in the 364 Treasury bill, which has less benefits than the Emakiba. The reason why there was an under-subscription for these 3 particular weeks is simply because of the network issues. There have been so much, people have not been able to access Emakiba because of system issues. They are using both the M-Pesa and the Pesa link. The people who normally use the Pesa link to subscribe to the Emakiba bond, the Pesa link itself was not working for the last 3 weeks. So they already eliminated from using that service. For the M-Pesa is obviously working, but the system for Emakiba also, people have been having trouble to access it. So it's not because they don't trust the government, it's simply because the last 3 weeks there has been that issue with the linkage between the M-Pesa platform and Emakiba and Pesa link. This year, most of the citizens were aware about Emakiba and the benefits it brings, because you can't compare Emakiba and the 364 Treasury bill, because it brings more liquidity. You can easily trade it. It gives 10% interest, which is far much higher than the current 364 day, which is at 9.364. And when you see those benefits, you get to understand it's not the same reason that was there before. It's simply because this time was the issue of the system, but for that time, I would simply say it's people didn't understand what this whole Emakiba was.
Over to the markets now, where the Nairobi Bulls are shared 76.29 billion shillings in terms of shareholder wealth on a sustained decline of share prices of key counters, reversing the peak that was attained last month.
The decline in unrealized wealth of investors is also mirrored in the top 20 stocks that are represented in the main NSE index.
From the peak market capitalization, which represents investor paper wealth of 2.403 trillion shillings as of February 11th, share prices of top counters have been on a decline, closing in at a combined value of 2.32 trillion shillings as of March 14th.
I think it's important to know why it dropped, because people don't. You look at the NSE 20 share index, which is one of the performance measure of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, but you don't get to understand what it means. NSE 20 share index just shows how the stocks of the 20 best performing companies are performing. When you look deeply into the NSE 20 share index, look at the sectors that have caused that index to drop. The telecommunication sector, which is obviously one company, and the banking sector have actually improved. And I'm using this basis in reference to the yield or to return to date, meaning simply that how much have investors earned from the capital, the share price appreciation for the past 1 year. It has actually improved in both the telecommunication sector and the banking sector. But when you look at the other sectors, that's energy, manufacturing, and partly insurance, they have drastically dropped. And that is what has caused the NSE 20 share index overall to drop. Also, as an investor, look at it also on how other companies within that market is performing. And when you use the other two market measures, that's the NSE 25 share index and the all share index, you'll see they've actually improved, meaning on the other companies are actually performing well. Their share prices have been increasing. So how it should influence investors is you look at it, once you look at the 20 share index, get to understand what has triggered that loss of income in form of share price.
Still on the market, Kenya's foreign reserves have hit a 5-month high by attaining a sharp gain of 24.5 billion shillings last week.
Official data from the Central Bank of Kenya shows that the reserves stand at 841.7 billion Kenyan shillings, equivalent to 5.45 months of import cover.
In the week ended March 8th, they stood at 817.2 billion shillings, representing a 5.29 months import cover. Let's therefore bring in our experts to help us understand what this impact has on the shilling standing and what is expected in the near future.
What we need to understand is the foreign reserve is not a factor that affects the changes in exchange rates. It's a measure that the central bank uses to stabilize the exchange rate that has been triggered by different factors. So in this case, the main factor that affects the exchange rates in Kenya, or rather the Kenya shilling in Kenya, is the balance of payments and the balance of trade. So when the imports exceed the exports to a very big level such that the trade deficit becomes so big, the central banks brings a measure of selling away the foreign currency that they currently have reserved so as to stabilize the Kenya shilling. So in the first week of March and the second week of March, there has been an appreciation of the Kenya shilling, and this has made it easier for central bank to acquire dollars because it is cheaper, and also to shield itself in case shocks come in the near future. So when we talk about central bank having an import cover of 5 months, what we simply mean is in case there has been an instability of the exchange rate in the 5 months period, the central bank has the capacity to stabilize that shilling within the 5-month period. So in the near future, we do expect the shilling to stabilize because one, we do have the import cover with the central bank, and two, there has been a balance between the demand for the dollars and the inflows we get from the diaspora, the diaspora, and also from the exports that have incurred within the year. For the first 6 months, there's a stabilization.
It was just last week on the Big Ten where we highlighted the increment on currency circulation as well as fake currency. This week on Tuesday, detectives impounded what was said to be 2 billion Kenyan shillings worth of fake money at the Barclays Queensway branch in Nairobi.
True indeed, Brenda. Now the seizure exposed a weak underbelly on customer surveillance systems from Kenyan banks, and this happened just a day after the Central Bank of Kenya gave Kenyan banks tough regulations on how to handle illicit cash.
The loophole in the bank surveillance system allowed a customer to bring into its premises $20 million worth of fake currency. This underlines the Central Bank of Kenya's call to banks to put in measures that will not allow illicit funds into their premises.
What really needs to come clear from the Big Ten this week is how does this happen in the Kenyan economy and from the banking sector, and what impact does this fake currency circulation in the economy have on Kenya?
One thing I expected from the bank management is to alert the national security organs about such a development. I want to suspect that this indeed has brought us to a point where we must conclude that some of the internal staff were colluding with these bandits to wreck our economy. Under normal circumstances, the repercussions, if this went through, are maybe threefold. One, we should have expected a case where this money will have been injected into the economy, and that would have led to a situation whereby there will be too much money in circulation, which is not accounted for, which definitely will be chasing very few goods and services within the economy. That will mean it will push up prices upwards. Secondly, it will lead to a question of inequalities. Some people somewhere will be having abundant money, which they have not worked for, and there will be now people carrying the short within the economy. And that will create disparities and inequalities. But what is more scaring, I think now Kenya is blacklisted in terms of eroding in totality investor confidence. Because you see, when you read every day that there's fake money in circulation, what are you telling the potential investors? You are scaring them away. So this definitely is going to erode investor confidence unless the entrusted organs or security organs move swiftly to tackle this issue. The other scaring thing here is that, you see, when it comes to transactions, particularly cash transactions, there's going to be a hiccup. For example, when you want to buy my product and you are giving me cash, particularly in 1,000 notes, I will first state and think twice whether to take it all or not. What does that mean economically? It will constrain the speed at which transactions are being transacted. And definitely that will create a situation where there would be total mistrust. And it will affect the velocity in terms of money exchange or in terms of the flow of money.
Big Ten takes a short break. We shall be back with 5 more of the big moments that shaped your week.
Remember, if you want to catch more of the Big Ten episodes, do follow us on our social media platforms at Metropol TV KE. We'll be right back. Know about business terms is something I love doing. You've heard of the word debit. This one I know you know.
We are keen on actively playing our role in positioning Kenya as an investment hub for East and Middle Africa.
Welcome back to the Big Ten. Now let's get right into the 5 stories we have left for you.
That is indeed true, Brenda. That means we are at that point where we're talking about public debt. And this is an issue that we've kept on speaking on the Big Ten from time to time. But on this Big Ten, we speak about it differently in terms of repayment. Because now the National Treasury indicates that Beijing is one of the biggest earners of Kenya's external debt repayments in a period dating 6 months to December 2018 compared to the same period in December 2017. This signaling the rise in concessional and semi-concessional loans that China has been injecting into the economy for infrastructure development. Beijing takes 69.45 billion shillings off the credit spent in Nairobi in the first half. Let's get some more numbers into perspective, therefore, before we ask our experts the big question on the Big Ten. This is what we know. Debt repayments to China have more than doubled to 6.3 billion shillings, representing 15.41% of the total cost of servicing external debts in a similar period in 2016, and 12.72 billion shillings, representing 18.53% of the total cost of foreign debts in 2017. This is the question, therefore. Why is there an increment in repayments, and what does this mean?
Most of us, we are making a mistake when we are analyzing the reasons as to why these debts have escalated. First of all, let me give you a full scenario about the Kenyan foreign debts. We are now currently using to a tune of 68% of our total GDP to service our foreign debts. What does that imply to our general economy? That will mean we are in an awkward situation whereby, remember, our total revenue within the country in any financial year, right now, if we talk about now this financial year, we are able to collect only 1.6 trillion Kenyan shillings. And then out of this 1.6, we are using 1.2 trillion to service our foreign and domestic what? Domestic debts. That leaves us with a balance of 600 billion to use. And out of this 600 billion, 400 billion we are using it into wages and what? Salaries, leaving us with a balance of only 300 billion for capital development. That means in any financial year, we must keep on again borrowing, because only 300 billion cannot suffice us to finance our yearly budgets unless we control, and I've advised the government through the agencies concerned what we need to do to avoid being in a debt trap. Because unless we check, we'll be credited unworthy. That's one. And secondly, unless we check, all what we collect in form of revenue will be going into servicing what? Servicing loans. That means we will not have any surplus for capital development. That brings us to a point where we must candidly advise that if we want to survive, first of all, let's control and minimize wastages, corruption. Because much of this money, if you evaluate the cost of the standard gauge railway line from Mombasa to Nairobi, it's overquoted. This is where the government lost billions of shillings. Not even the dams. In fact, the greatest scandal in Kenya now is not even these dams we are talking about. Is the inflated costs of the standard gauge railway line, including compensation for land and all these things. The appetite of borrowing is quite high. We need to control it. And that's why Parliament should come with some legislative rules, acts, where they must limit, they must create a ceiling of how much the government should borrow within a given financial year.
A policy review by state-run think tank Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research and Analysis says manufacturing sector has continuously missed its job targets over the year, despite it having potential of being one of the key contributors to the national economy.
All right, let's put this into numbers, therefore, so that you understand. But the sector has created some 700,000 jobs, all right, in a period of 4 years to 2016, against a projected 1.1 million. Now, this represents a 36.6% underperformance.
Projections for formal manufacturing were 338,000, but only 30,000 jobs were created. Informal manufacturing or dual Kali was projected to create 770,000 jobs, of which 670,000 were realized.
Now, this job creation represents 8 and 87% respectively for both formal and informal manufacturing. What does this therefore mean, or why is there an underemployment in this sector, and why does this transform into the sector's performance?
I think the major challenge here when it comes to the manufacturing sector is that we have not prioritized the key sectors under that sector that we should focus on. You know, when it comes to manufacturing, really, in Kenya, we are more endowed in terms of agro-processing, and we have not put more focus into developing those small-scale industries which are related to agricultural agro-processing. Secondly, you see many farms which are within the manufacturing sector are opting for high level of mechanization. So they are resorting into high capital intensive approach other than the labor intensive approach. So the ratio of capital to labor is higher, as the contrary to the expectations that these industries were created to create more job opportunities. Now, maybe perhaps the cost of capital is lower than the cost of labor. Yeah. You see, if I'm having a farm and I highly mechanize this farm, I will get rid of what? I'll get rid of labor, and I employ fewer labor units as compared to highly intensified capital units, whose end result will be high level of productivity. As we invest in the manufacturing sector, I think we don't have a clear industrial roadmap. A clear industrial roadmap will have helped the Kenya government to identify critical subsectors within the manufacturing where Kenya has a local comparative advantage, so that we are able to tap those opportunities based on our local resources, from where we'll be able to grow faster and employ more labor units. But on the contrary, I think we are shying away from that, and that's why the manufacturing sector is stagnant. To be aggressive in terms of diversifying. That notwithstanding, you remember, if we are talking of manufacturing and processing, we are talking about rural electrification. In Kenya, we are seeing a scenario where there is power rationing. The cost of energy in Kenya is very high. Those are some of the factors that are negatively negating on the growth and development of the manufacturing industry. That notwithstanding, with also the prices of other inputs, the prices of raw materials. Yeah.
Now, still on the manufacturing sector, as we take a look at the environment, where new restrictions of the use of the light gauge paper bags signals another hit in the pockets of customers, as they'll be forced to pay more money in order to be able to use these durable materials.
Now, National Environmental Management Authority, that is NEMA, says the effect or the ban will take effect as from the end of this month, citing heavy consequences on the environment on their continued use due to the lower production standards of the light gauge paper bags.
You see, when we look at the latest pronouncements of these bags, it's going to affect three groups of personalities. One, the manufacturers themselves have already heavily invested in the technology of producing the current bags in question. And more importantly, they have produced large stock of such bags. So when you come instantly with a ban, the thing which will happen here is that these manufacturers will incur huge losses. And now the question would be, who will assist them to bear these losses? Secondly, it becomes demotivating when there is no consistency in terms of policy regarding to this issue. Remember, you see, before a manufacturer starts producing, he must have invested must have acquired some level of technology which is going to use to produce this product into the market. So when you come by surprise and denounce the product, you now discourage this investor from further investments. So it becomes a demotivating kind of factor. On the side of traders, you know, traders are going to be inconvenienced in terms of packaging of the various items purchased in their respective business enterprises to the clients. So that is going to be a constraining factor of giving the clients these products in terms of a packaged form. When it comes to the clients themselves, whom we call consumers, the final price of the new bags is going to be shared proportionately. That means it's going to push the prices of respective product where upwards. And indeed, it's going to inflict misery and injury to the final consumer, because it's not only going to raise the cost of living, it's going to make these prices of these products to do what? To go up. So at the end of it all these stakeholders will be losers. And that brings us to the point where we are advising the concerned agency to be more proactive in terms of policy formulation. They should have foreseen this in advance and actually avoided such incidences of taking people by storm by other new pronouncements, which are actually constraining the efforts of investments.
Over to the transport sector now, where Kenya Airways and Italy's largest airline company, Alitalia, have entered into a codeshare partnership that will see both companies offer their customers more travel options from the hubs in Nairobi and Rome.
The deal, which became effective last Thursday, will see Alitalia's current place on Kenya Airways flights beyond Nairobi to Mombasa and Kisumu, as well as other African countries that include Accra, Addis Ababa, Dar es Salaam, among others.
True indeed, Rwanda, the move is aimed at giving customers a one-stop move or seamless travel from Nairobi to Rome. Here's the thing, with the headlines that have been running down at Kenya Airways, is this merger one that is going to get the company out of the rubble?
Partnership in any business is the way to go. But what I'll advise is that before they enter into any serious arrangements, this partnership must be carefully thought, so that none of the parties going to be losers or gainers. There must be a win-win kind of situation. Remember when Kenya Airways partnered with KLM, it was nearly reviving itself. So I recommend that before they enter into this partnership, which is healthy, this partnership must be carefully thought of. The arrangements must be carefully thought, to the point that when they resort into partnership, they must also resort into vertical and horizontal business arrangements, so that port companies or port airways will be able to do what? To win. But that said and done, I think the issue of Kenya Airways is far more than that. We need to look at the issue of their strategy in the market. It's misplaced. Yeah? You see, I was in China recently, and I visited Port Ethiopian Airlines and the offices of in Wansu, the offices of Kenya Airways. So I asked the price of Kenya Airways from Wanshu to Nairobi. It was 145,000. The Ethiopian Airlines was 85,000. Yeah, you see the difference. So the issue of Kenya Airways not making a breakthrough is not resorting into joint venture arrangements or partnership. I think it's the issue of strategic reorganization amongst the airline itself. First of all, they have employed staff. Yeah, they have employed staff. They have spread themselves so they are plotted in terms of routing. They are flying even where they are not supposed to be flying to. Their pricing strategy is misplaced, if not weird. Yeah, and then there is gross mismanagement. You read recently special fuel for aircrafts, what 3.4 billion as it disappeared. I don't know whether you are aware of that. So these are some of the issues which really that body should deal with before they even resort into doing what? Into those arrangements.
More loans as the government is negotiating with China for another loan of about 370 billion shillings in order to finish the third phase of the standard gauge railway.
Acting Director Philip Mahinga says that negotiating to finance a system that will see the railway, its equipment, goods and passengers are safe as it makes its way through the sparsely populated regions in its 974-kilometer journey from Mombasa to Malaba in Busia.
The initial loan which was borrowed was enough to finish this project. And that's why the Auditor General need to come out candidly and tell us where this anomaly is coming from. Secondly, Kenya is not ripe for any further borrowing. We need to put a stop to any borrowing. We foresee the completion of these projects which are there currently. And then after we have foreseen the completion of these projects, based on how we are going to organize ourselves internally, we need, after that, need to rethink our strategy of borrowing. I think I'm convinced that there are new partners out there we can identify from whom we can borrow from at better terms. We should not be so much inclined into China, into Korea, or into France. We need to be aggressive in diversifying and identifying new partners in business from where we can be able to borrow cheaper cheaper loans which at friendly at friendly concessionary terms. But for now, it's not advisable for any further borrowing until we see the completion of the current projects and we assess and evaluate their impact to the economy.
We've come to the end of today's Big Ten. I do hope you enjoyed it. My name is Brenda Nemichaba.
My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiage. A big thank you to the experts who made this a Big Ten. It certainly was. We'll see you next week.
Most definitely. And remember, if you want to catch more episodes of the Big Ten, do follow us on our social media platforms at Metropol TV KE. That's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, as well as YouTube. Until next time.
All right, now we can chat, and guys are thinking, oh my God, those guys are talking about very important stuff, but I'm telling you, it has not been a good day on the set with you, you know? All right, and we're gonna get done, you know? It happens like that, and we are gone.